I need to explain the situation first. So there is a scene where Om comes out in rage and Nausicaa saves Yupa under attack. I think everyone has already seen the movie, so play it back in your brain. Yupa is attacked by Om, then saved by Nausicaa, his former disciple. Nausicaa yells to him on her glider called Maeve, "Get upwind of it!" Yupa is surprised at the growth of Nausicaa. Oh well, that was Nausicaa. He didn't recognize it at first glance. He climbs on the dunes with surprise. Then there are many strange towers standing there. This is the first point of Buddha Nausicaa, insect repellent tower. Well, as Yupa climbs up the hill, stone towers stand on the dunes, and many strange windmills are attached and making humming noises. According to the storyboard, this is an insect repellent tower, and it says when the windmill rotates with the wind, an unpleasant sound for insects is produced. Look at here, up close. Can you zoom in? It's hard to see, but there are small holes in the middle of the windmill blades. As these blades rotate, the air passes through the holes, producing low-frequency sound, similar to the insect charm Nausicaa has. It's a sound insects dislike. So there is a tower to prevent insects flying from the toxic jungle to the Valley of the Wind in the setting. Well, it's something like a mosquito guard. There's a product called ultrasonic mosquito repellent that emits ultrasonic with a single AA battery to keep insects away, so think of it like that. It seems to be it's too much to just do this trick. So I think there should be another role of this tower, which is to indicate the strength and direction of the wind. So yes, it does repel the insects, but there's another function. The Valley of the Wind can only exist thanks to the wind, blowing up from the sea that protects the people from the spores and miasma, the deadly poison that drift from the sea of corruption. In other words, wind is everything for them. If the wind stops or blows backward, the village will soon die. Miyazaki himself wrote about this. Of course, the wind sometimes blows from different directions. So they have some techniques and mechanisms to survive through them somehow. But he didn't explain exactly what it was. So that's what we need to interpret from the material shown. Like, we need to think, if the wind in the Valley of the Wind flows backward, how will they protect themselves? One way is this insect repellent tower. They have some structure like a gearbox, somewhere around here. That's the mechanism to know. For example, when the rotation speed changes. Therefore, when the wind direction or speed changes, some other sound comes off instead of the insect repellent sound. Or maybe in addition to the insect repellent sound. There could be a function to generate some ticking sound or a higher pitch sound to notify someone with good hearing in the Valley of the Wind. Even though I'll use my imagination, the main purpose of Buddha Nausicaa is to analyze what it was that Miyazaki really tried to depict in this movie. That's going to be the main goal of my analysis of Nausicaa. This insect repellent tower itself is written on the storyboard as a setting. But shouldn't there be any other mechanism in the tower that can tell the direction of the wind? That's my imagination. Next, I'll interpret from the image, not from a written text. This tower is made of stone, and the reason for that is, what looks like sand is not actually sand. As I explained, they are rust and ceramic fragments. There is no such thing as iron in this world. While Miyazaki was making this film, he told Isao Takahata, a Ghibli producer and creator, everything that looks like sand in this world is a ceramic fragment, and there is no longer any ordinary sand or earth. Then Takahata was quite amused and said, "Oh, that's a story about people living in such a world? It's amazing! You should depict it in detail." That's going to make this truly a science fiction, and it should be meaningful to draw the strength of those who make their living in such a world. When Takahata got excited and said that. But when Miyazaki heard that, he responded, "I don't have time to do that. I only have 2 hours." So they had a big fight. Takahata said, "It's nonsense to just have them in your head. Visualize them if you thought about them." But Miyazaki said, "I can't put anything else in the movie if I do that." In other words, the difference between Takahata, who later ended up drawing the process of making cotton flowers and only yesterday, and Miyazaki, who gets angry saying it's nonsense to draw such scenes, can already be seen here. Takahata thinks everyday details as well as daily lives of people should be depicted first. What is in the world and how do you live? And to that end, that's fine to end up with a less interesting film. On the other hand, for Miyazaki, who, despite making a movie like Lupin III and Castle of Cagliostro, packed with a lot of fun, but tanked at the box office, was deprived of any chance to make work for many years. And was like, this is my last chance. I have to get a box office smash, so I have to make an amusing story. So of course they'd fight. So, since no incident, no story is the motto in Miyazaki's work, there are many settings that are drawn in the pictures but not explained in the story. One of them is the stone tower. So with Buddha Nausicaa method, I will try to describe Miyazaki's true vision of the Valley of the Wind and what was in his head as much as possible. As I said, there's no more iron existing in this world. The reason is that all materials have been replaced by ceramics many years ago. Iron and other materials have already been excavated and all have been replaced by ceramics. That's super ceramic, a fictitious material made up by Miyazaki. This super ceramic is not like pottery as we imagine today, but some dream material that can freely produce the property no matter how thin, strong, or flexible it is. So no one tries to find or use an alternative materials or matters. Even for the clothing, Miyazaki refers to this as ceramic civilization, as everything is made of ceramic. What this means is that this is a replacement for our oil civilization. Materials that did not exist until about 150 years ago, such as plastic or any petroleum products, came into our lives. Today, even if you think you're wearing cotton clothing, for example, petroleum-based ink could be used as its printing material. So anyway, petroleum is used everywhere in our lives. This is our civilization, but what Miyazaki imagined is that with further evolution, everything is made of ceramic. Since it's so convenient no matter how soft, hard, colored, or durable it should be, ceramic is the best material in all aspects. So you no longer need to use any other materials, and this ceramic can not only be made by baking clay, like what we do today, but also from various materials. So ordinary materials such as wood or iron existed before, have been replaced by ceramic. So in this world, there are actually no other resources but the abundant ceramic materials. If there is the technology to produce ceramics, there should have been any problem. But since the technology to recycle them has been lost, the world became a place where there's not only non-recyclable ceramics, and the desert with such materials has been created, and the world has passed the point of no return. Therefore, in the Valley of the Wind, metal parts, or anything that looks like metal parts, for example, such as the fittings that look like metal used in the windmills, are often carved from blocks of ceramics. Therefore, in the world of Nausicaa, newly made items look very rugged in shapes. That's because those easy-to-handle metals, such as iron and brass, are all gone. They have large aircrafts, for example. Valley of the Wind has gunships, or as they come out later in the movie, Pejite or Tolmekia have large aircrafts, which they call airships. They have been excavated and used, but once they need to repair their parts, the only way is to carve ceramic pieces into similar shapes from scratch, because there are no other materials. So, this insect repellent tower did not exist before the industrial civilization collapsed. There was no such insects at the time. Therefore, they had to start from scratch. So, what happened was that the Valley of the Wind had to return to the Stone Age in a sense. Returning to the Stone Age, they've built this tower by stacking pebbles. Indeed, they can make some parts of the windmill from some materials preserved somehow, or from the trees growing there. And they can also scrape off the ceramic products or fragments, but all these are piled up in the form of shattered ceramic pebbles or remainings, as if they were back at the Stone Age. That's why the buildings of the Valley of the Wind are made of bricks, clay, and stone. They've returned to the Stone Age. This is not an exaggeration, but rather based and modeled on the historical fact that the whole Europe was suddenly degenerated to the Stone Age after the fall of the Roman Empire, which ruled Europe with scientific civilization. Sorry to bring up something like a classroom subject, but Roman civilization was famous for its Roman aqueducts and marble buildings. However, maintaining this Roman civilization required huge forest resources. So they had to cut down forests all over Europe in a little over 500 years. Of course, the Roman Empire was ruined by the invasion of different ethnic groups, but once the civilization was ruined, no one could repair the aqueducts or marble buildings. Nobody knew how those were made anymore, and no forest or timber were left for the foundations, so they couldn't even return to the time when they constructed the building with trees. So, after the fall of Roman civilization, for nearly a millennium, some parts of Europe were brought back to almost the Stone Age stage, while others somehow tried to maintain the former cultural or technological standards. Until the forest was rejuvenated and the Renaissance began, the Middle Ages was really called the Dark Ages for this reason. The same is true for the Valley of the Wind. We can't do anything without a smartphone today, right? Similarly, without the help of ceramic or creatures created by genetic engineering, humans in this age, which is 800 years from now, can no longer live. Thousands of years after the collapse of civilization, the people of the Valley of the Wind have finally gone through the post-ceramic age and are moving to a slightly better era than the Stone Age. Such an era is described, which you can see from the stone structure of this insect repellent tower. After the scene, Nausicaa... Oops, this one. She comes down yelling, "Lord Yupa!" Nausicaa's vehicle, which is like a hang glider, is called Maeve. It is also an ancient heritage. Like the gunship that will come out in the movie later, it can't be repaired anymore. And it works with some power of which they don't even understand the mechanism. So it is something very precious. But Nausicaa rides the wind with it very well. This is the scene where Nausicaa lands with Maeve. When she tries to lower the altitude, it slightly soars up and the altitude rises. Then it drops sharply right afterwards. What this means is that she's trying to avoid passing by Yupa with this speed and angle. So she tilts the glider upward once. As a result, Maeve ascends once slightly, then it loses speed and sharply drops from there. It looks like Maeve is flying up again for a moment, but then it quickly comes back down. Finally, she slowly descends by manipulating the aircraft. So she is pretty good at maneuvering. The movie captures the realistic movements of flying by showing how Nausicaa lands. This is how Nausicaa's posture looks like at the landing. She extends her legs as the speed drops. And when she touches the ground, she bends her knees to land, abandons Maeve, and crouches to dash at a stretch. As she crouches to dash, she bends over and runs straight to this side immediately. She takes off her mask, the hood, and the goggles while running, and at this point, finally, the heroine appears. She rushes down, taking her mask off, and shows her face as her face close-up cut in. Then she yells, "Lord Yupa!" I couldn't capture it, but the next cut is the close-up of Nausicaa's left hand, so you can see how fast she runs toward the screen. There's no unnecessary movement here. So, if you see all these as a sequence, it's hard to tell. But she comes down, turns right, dashes toward the center of the screen, but drifts slightly to this side due to inertia, to the right side of the screen. So she runs in a curve toward us. It's really a scene by an absolute illustrating genius. So the way to enjoy here as Buddha Nausicaa is at the moment of landing. When she lands, you see a foreshadowing for the climax in the background. What you see behind is the acid sea. In front of it is the wreckage of the spaceship, in which all the people in the Valley of the Wind take shelter during the last battle. So, in other words, in this first scene, it already shows clearly the situation of the last scene, where a spaceship is abandoned at slightly higher than the Valley of the Wind near the acid sea. And as for this spaceship, when director Hideaki Anno first saw it in the storyboard, and then in the layout, since the design was so unimpressive, he said, "This is more like a submarine. Can't we think again a little more?" But Miyazaki didn't even listen to it. Anno complained even in audio commentary of the DVD, "Miyasan never cares about what he is not interested in. He kept bugging us on so many things, like, you guys don't study at all. You're not going to make anything good. But look at that spaceship. It's like a submarine. No good, no good." He said, well, that's really true. In any event, Miyazaki didn't forget to show such a thing as a visual foreshadowing from the very beginning. This is a conversation between Yupa and Nausicaa after a long absence. "Nausicaa, I didn't recognize you," says Yupa. "It's been over a year now," Nausicaa answers. So they met for the first time in over a year. However, when she's asked, "So how is your family?" she starts looking gloomy. Yupa asks, "What's wrong?" And she says, "It's that father can't fly anymore." Yupa is surprised. "King Jill?" "So, the jungle's poisons are taking their toll." Nausicaa answers, "Yes, father says it's the fate of all of us who live near the jungle," and Yupa says, "I'm sorry, I should have come sooner." So, Nausicaa's father, Jill, the patriarch or the king of the Valley of the Wind, has been in bed from the beginning of the movie, but it hasn't been for so long. He was fine when Yupa was in the Valley of the Wind a year and a half ago. So he used to be fine, but is now in bed and can't move anymore in just a year and a half. His disease caused by the jungle's poison got worse so quickly. As she says, he can't fly anymore, it means the old man in bed in the movie actually used to fly just a year and a half ago. When I discovered this, I thought, like, hey, wait a minute, I thought Jill was in bed for a long time, but wait, can't fly anymore? Means actually he flew until a year and a half ago? That was a surprise. So it was only recently that Nausicaa inherited and started flying with the Maeve. I was surprised. The fate of all of us who live near the jungle, Nausicaa says. This Nausicaa's gloomy line is also the theme of this film. In the anime, the Valley of the Wind is depicted like a utopia. A director, Mamoru Oshii, has criticized this severely. But behind the scene, as I've just said, life is quite harsh, such that people become bedridden in just 1.5 years, as you realize gradually. This is because what Hayao Miyazaki wanted to do was to depict desert people, even in his debut manga. He dealt with the theme, why do humans live in such a harsh environment as the desert? And how should I say, I brought this up when I gave a talk on Porco Rosso. But there is a novel called Wind, Sand, and Stars by Saint-Exupéry, also depicting a harsh environment of South American and African deserts. The reason why humans live in such an environment is that by being exposed to the wind in such a cruel environment, so to speak, living in harsh nature that is not friendly to humans, their humanity and spirituality will be enhanced. Miyazaki read this in his youth, was really shocked and became obsessed with an idea of why do desert people live in the desert since then? Why don't the desert people live in water-rich areas? Because they do not settle but keep relocating. But we may think, if they can move around, why don't they just live in a more comfortable place? How come they bother to choose places that are hard to live? That's the question that comes out in all of Miyazaki's animation works, the major theme that comes out many times in his films. It is because there's a community that is worth supporting, worth living in such places with, even if it gives them a hardship. And you can start to see that kind of theme in Nausicaa. The Iron Town of Princess Mononoke is a typical example. In Princess Mononoke, that was depicted as the theme of the film in a more straightforward way. Then why is the Valley of the Wind worth supporting? Why do Nausicaa and the people live in such a poisonous place that could take her father's life? If you watch this movie, or maybe on TV, just aimlessly, it might look to you like because they're friends to believe in each other, because there is peace, or because they live with nature. However, for Nausicaa and the people, life in the Valley of the Wind should be something more cruel indeed. So, to what extent should their life in such a cruel environment be depicted? This was where Miyazaki and Takahata had a big fight, as I mentioned earlier. I would like to cover this major theme in detail in the limited broadcast. Well, so Nausicaa meets Yupa again, and in order to bring the good news that Lord Yupa is here to everyone in the valley, are we alright? It's about 40 minutes already. Only a little over half of the first half has been covered.